Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, my name's Kay. I'm an alcoholic. First of all, I want to thank Terry for inviting me here. It's always good to come to an AA meeting, and it's always a blessing to be able to share my message. I'm an alcoholic. That means that for the first part of my life, alcohol was my solution. I just never did fit in anywhere. And as I progressed in my life, I kept thinking, well, if I get this, I'll fit in. If I do this, I'll fit in. If I get married, if I have a child, when I become a nurse, all these things, I'll fit in. I'll belong somewhere. But that's not true. At least it wasn't true for me. I had to find alcohol, and alcohol was what allowed me to live. Alcohol worked for me for a long time, and if alcohol still worked, I'd still be out there. But alcohol started becoming my problem. So when I came in here, alcohol was no longer my solution. They told me to come in here, to go to meetings, get a commitment, take the steps, get a sponsor, and you're going to feel better. God, were they right. I started feeling pain better. I started feeling fear better. I started feeling resentment better. You know, I was so sick and dry that I couldn't stand it. 4 years ago, I was in the living room of my house saying, 6 years ago, I was in the living room of my house saying, 4 years ago, I was just an alcoholic, and I went to AA meetings. Right then and there, I was suicidal. I was planning suicide, and I was planning it for one reason and one reason only. I could not tolerate the pain that had been my life. I was waking up in pain, I was going to bed in pain. And so I was planning suicide. I didn't want anyone to know. You see, the gift was, I loved my daughter more than I was in pain. So I was planning the suicide so no one would know. So what did I do, being a good alcoholic? I took extra commitments at meetings. I started working extra, and I decided when I end up dead, they're all going to say, well, she had a wonderful program. It must have been natural causes. You know, it wasn't going to be anything dramatic. I just needed to get out of the pain. One of the commitments I had a man who, sometimes you have these meetings where there's one person who runs the meeting. This man gave me a quote at the meeting, and I said, this reminds me of a quote of Abraham Lincoln about alcoholism. And this gentleman said, Abraham Lincoln never said anything about alcoholics. And you see, I might have been suicidal, but I was not about to lose an argument. So I had a copy of the quote, but I couldn't find it because I had just moved. So I called up the man that I got the copy from, and I said, can I get another copy? Because I need to win an argument. And he said, sure, fine, I'll drop it off so-and-so. And I said, wait a minute, you can't do that. So I started telling him what was going on in my life. You see, I was 4 years sober, and I had lost everything that I thought was important to me. The only thing that was still the same is I had a job. Everything else was gone out of my life. And that really wasn't fun, because I would come to speaker meetings and they would talk about all the nasty things they did while they were drinking, and they talked about becoming sober and wondering that they were now in heaven and they had this wonderful job and they met the man of their dreams and their children were wonderful. And I thought, what's wrong with me? Why is it going backwards for me? I just couldn't get it. So I started talking to this man, and he said, it sounds like this is a great time for it to happen because you have a program of recovery in your life. You have a God as you understand him. You know no harm will come to you. And I said, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Hung up the phone and I said, what the hell was he talking about? But during those few minutes, when I was listening to him, I found peace. So I called him up, and I started talking to him some more. And then I met him and had coffee with him. And I started telling him my sad tale of woe. And he said, that's just untreated alcoholism. That's infantile ego. That's just self-obsession. And then I'd say, go on some more. And he said, well, you're just in your untreated alcoholism. That's just your alcoholism. And I was getting angry. And I said, excuse me, I am 4 years sober. I am not in any untreated alcoholism. And he said, well, of course you are. He said, your past will be your future unless you change. He said, you didn't have a solution, and you still don't have a solution. He said, doesn't it say in the big book, our personal adventures before and after? Before we quit drinking and after we quit drinking? Made clear 3 pertinent ideas. 1, we were alcoholics. We could not manage our own lives. 2, that probably no human power could relieve us of this alcoholism. And 3, God could and would if he were sought. He said, if you're not seeking your God, then you're still going back to your head. He said, you need to talk about this with your sponsor. And I said, well, can I talk to you about this a little bit? And he started explaining to me. The first step says, I'm powerless over alcohol. My life is unmanageable. It says that my mind is warped. He said, your mind isn't going to ever be unwarped. It's kind of like a warped board. You can throw a piece of wood into the ocean, and you can take that out, it'll be driftwood. You're never going to make that piece of wood straight again. And he said, there's another thing we alcoholics do. It's called self-talking. We talk to ourselves all the time. We tell ourselves all the bad things that are going to happen. And it'll never change. This story will never change in here. So I started to get to understand my warped mind a little bit better. You see, my warped mind sings to me. There's 2 songs it sings to me. They're both from the 60s. The first song is from the Beatles. I'm a loser. All the Beatles songs, that's the song my mind sings to me, okay? The second one is Linda Ronstadt. You're no good, you're no good, you're no good. Baby, you're no good. This is how I was living my life. I had a problem. A stoplight, for instance. Why do I get all the stoplights? I'm a loser, I'm a loser, you know. How come I didn't get that job at work? You're no good, you're no good, you're no good. Over and over and over and over again. He said, there's a difference between admitting something and accepting something. Acceptance is the key to all your problems. If you accept the fact that you have a warped mind, then you're not going to go to that mind for the next great idea. Who would go to a crazy person to ask their opinion on something? Only a crazy person. When I was married, my husband said that you are brutally honest. He was wrong. I'm brutally opinionated and brutally judgmental. That's what I am. But I am so judgmental to you, but I'm so judgmental to me. You see, I couldn't live in the world as I saw it. It says in our big book, we have to come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life the way we were living it. I was 4 years sober before I could come to believe that. You see, I've now begun to understand that when you come into AA, you walk into this circle of grace. And the circle of grace kept me alive long enough. I kept going to meetings. I did what I was supposed to do long enough that I could live long enough to really understand the real message here. I did not need to live in a world that was unsafe, that was brutal, where people were out to get me, where they were judging me, that I had to judge them before they judged me. I didn't need to live that way anymore. I don't need to self-talk anymore. You see, the life I was living was like this. I'd have my alarm clock set. But before the alarm clock went off in the morning, my mind would start telling me everything that was going to go wrong in the day I was in. So by the time the alarm clock went off, I had to shut off the alarm and start running like hell because I was behind. They were already telling me, when you go to work, you're going to be working with her. She's going to be in charge. She doesn't like you. You're going to get all the tough patients. They're going to be very sick. The doctors aren't going to answer your phone calls. You're going to be running back and forth. You'll never get anything accomplished. And she's just going to keep giving you more and more and more patients. So fine. So then I get in the shower. Okay, well, when she does this, I'll do that. Okay, and then this happens here, and then I'll do that. And then this will happen here, and then I'll do that. And then I'd get out of the shower, and I'd dry off, and I'd get my clothes, and I'd get to work, and I'd be walking down the hall, and then I'd see her, and she'd say, "Hi, Kay." And I'd say, "Yeah, right." She'd cause me all this misery for an hour, and she thinks I'm going to be her friend? Oh, please. I couldn't live. I just couldn't live. This is what was happening to me. When I started understanding that this was the nature of my warped mind, I started integrating the steps. You see, this isn't about knowledge of the steps. It won't do me any good to know that the best mechanic in town lives next door to me if there's nothing wrong with my car. If I still think I can manage my life, I have no need for God's guidance in my life. He can stay up in heaven where he belongs. I can go visit him once a week on Sunday. You see, the real message for me in Alcoholics Anonymous was the fact that I can no longer have the fantasy that I can manage my own life. So now when I wake up and my mind tells me all the terrible things that are going to happen, I say, "Okay, Lord, if all those things happen, the good news is it's not my problem. It's yours. And so I'm not going to worry about this." Because it says in the foreword to the 12 and 12 that the 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can remove the obsession to drink and allow the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. So this is what the purpose of this is. I'm actually supposed to be happy. Today, right now, I'm supposed to be happy. You see, I kept thinking before I had my bottom in AA that I'd go to meetings and all of a sudden I'd be struck happy. And my first sponsor said, only an alcoholic would expect to receive a reward for getting a gift. And that's exactly what I was. I got this gift of not needing to drink, and so, okay, where's it for me? Come on, where's this happy life? Well, I couldn't have a happy life because I was still running the show. So now when I get up, I give all those problems that don't even exist to God. I go into my bathroom and I have a little piece of paper that I've typed something on the side of my mirror, and it says, "Good morning, this is God speaking. I will be handling all your problems today. I do not need your help, so have a good day." And I say, okay, all I need to do is have a good day. And now when I get in the shower, I enjoy the hot water. I actually choose the kind of shampoo I want to have. I ask God what smell he wants me to have for the day. I get out of the shower and I get dried and I say, "Thank you for this wonderful day." I get in my car and I drive to work. And when I take care of my patients, I thank God that I'm on that side of the bed. When I have a patient that's a lot sicker than me, I don't think, "Oh man, look at all the work I have to do." I thank God that I can be able to help him instead of him having to help me. You see, this is a spiritual program because it says in the first page of We Agnostics that if we cannot control and enjoy our drinking, we may suffer from an illness that has only a spiritual answer. So this is a spiritual program because I have no answers left up here in my warped mind. My sponsor told me that once I accept the fact that I have a warped mind and I can't go to it, the next thing to do is to go into the second step. And that's to find a power greater than myself, because that power isn't warped. And that power wants me to be happy. And my sponsor also told me that my life now is, I have to visualize my life as a room with one chair in it. I'm the one who has power over who sits in that chair. If I put my God in that chair, I'll have a good day and things will go well. If I put myself in that chair, I'll be full of fear. I'll be full of anger. I'll be full of resentment. And so I choose now in the morning to put God in my chair. And I enjoy that because I find that if I make that decision in 3 to turn my will and my life just today, right now, into the care of a God that loves me, I have a good day. Now, I can't always stay there because none of us can do this program perfectly, but I was told that I have to try to develop a companionship with God. What I do to try to get that companionship with God is I try to talk to him all the time. Sometimes I forget. So my sponsor said there's a lot of things I can do to help me with that. One of the things he told me to do is to use a rubber band. So I keep a rubber band around my wrist. And every time I look down at my watch, I say hello to my God. And I say, you know, I'm okay. How are you doing? I'm doing fine right now. And that's all I have to do. I just have to try to keep that contact with him. I have to understand that he's the all in my life. You see, every one of these steps has principles I have to use all the time. You know, in step 4, where we make that searching and fearless moral inventory, I'm not through with it until I'm through with it. You see, one thing that stands out to me all the time in step 4 is it says there that we are unable to have a true relationship with another human being. We either want to control them or we want to be controlled by them. So I was told that what I need to do is I need to have a divine third. So which means I don't have a one-on-one relationship with a person. It's my God and I, and whoever's there with me. And whoever's there with me is who should be there with me. And I ask God for him to direct my thinking. When someone throws something at me, you know, I don't know if any of you know nurses, but we're not soft and gentle people. You know, we're rather tough. I use the term that we eat our young. You know, we can do that. We just kind of, you know, we want the bottom line, and whoever gets in our way is a casualty. It's too bad, you know. I was at work, and someone called me up, another nurse. She called me up, and then she ripped me up one side, and then she ripped me up the other side, and she said, you know, do you even have a license? Do you even know what you're doing? And, you know, I mean, for this old alcoholic, you know, I thought, oh, you have no idea who you're playing with, girl. And instead of that, I took this to my God. And I said, can you believe what she's saying to me, God? Can you actually believe what she's saying? You know what I want to say to her, but you know I'm not going to say it. I'm going to ask you to tell me what to say to her. And every time I did that, she had no response. It was like I took all the wind out of her balloon. I kept taking the wind out of her balloon. And when I hung up that phone, I didn't carry any of that animosity. You see, we have a program that works if we don't go to this crazy lady up here. You know, if I don't go up here, and if I go to the true source of my life, I don't have to worry about what anybody says to me. You know, in the 5th step, I was finally beginning to understand the word forgiven, because my sponsor pointed out that there's 5 promises in the 5th step, and one of them is that I will not only be able to forgive people, but maybe feel that I could be forgiven. I had no idea what forgiveness was all about. I said, you know, it's going to be hard for me because I'm an Irish woman, you know, we don't forgive easily. And he said, you don't have to think about yourself as being an Irish woman. You have to think about yourself as being a child of God. You can forgive because that's your purpose. Because children are born in the likeness of their parents. And if you're God's kid, you were born to forgive. Because what has God done to you all your life? What was his purpose in your life? He gave and he gave and he gave. What's the definition of forgiveness? Forgiveness has two root words. For, meaning the purpose of. When you have a sign on a car and it says for sale, the purpose of this car to be parked here is I want to sell this sucker. For, the purpose of me is to give. Not to trade, but to give. My sponsor helped me realize that what I did all my life was trade with people. I'll say something nice to you, you say something nice to me. You don't say something nice to me, I'll rip you right back. You know, there was no giving in that. You know, it was all trading, trading, trading. And in the fifth step, I started understanding this thing about forgiveness. And then the sixth step, I swear that's the hardest step, and that's a step that continues to be ongoing, because I have to be entirely ready to have all my defects removed. And I said, well, how are you entirely ready? And I was told, you're entirely ready by not doing it. God can't remove a defect of character that you're still using. And so when you want to get up and rip someone a new one, when your judgment, when you're brutally judging someone and you want to tell them that, and you don't tell them that, then you're becoming entirely ready to have that removed. And that's an ongoing process for me. But when I do that, I can feel the power of God surge through me, because I myself don't have it. He fills me with that. Because you see, I was told that in 3, we make this decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him, but we can't do anything about that decision because we have 2 barriers. And the 2 barriers, the first barrier is me. That character that I became trying to protect myself from this cruel world. I get rid of her by doing 4 and 5 and 6. Over and over again, she's out of the picture. So finally in 7, I can humbly ask God to remove my defects of character. It's not up to me to remove those defects of character. It's up to me to be in a position to have them removed by not holding on to them. So that's where 7 is. I can finally start having a real relationship. But then I have this other obstacle that I need to overcome. And that other obstacle is you. Everybody in the whole wide world, and every red light, and every car who's driving in front of me. That's where I come in with 8, 9, and 10. In 8, God, 8 was so hard. To be willing to make amends to people, to make a list of those I've harmed and to be willing to make amends to them. And I was not willing to make amends to my ex-husband. I can remember, arguing with my sponsor and saying, "Are you telling me I have to?" He said, "No, I'm telling you, you need to be willing." We're talking about 8 in here. My sponsor explained to me what harmed meant. He explained to me that I can't harm you without harming me. He explained to me that when I harm you, I start trying to justify it. Well, I wouldn't have done that if she just hadn't have done this. She made me do this, so I had to. Really, down deep inside, I'm a good person. There was a time when I was in my early sobriety, I was at a women's meeting, and as I came to the meeting, there was a gal at the doorway, and she said, "Kay, you look so nice today." You know what my mind heard? That I normally look like a piece of turd. So I just kind of stopped and I looked her up and down and I said, "Well, thank you very much." And I proceeded to walk to the other side of the room and glared at her and developed a resentment towards her. How dare she tell me I look good? Who does she think she is judging me? Blah, blah, blah. My sponsor said, that's exactly it. Why do you think we become such resentment hoarders? Because resentment allows me to continue my behavior. You see, if I act rudely, I can figure out a reason why you made me act rudely. And then I can resent you for that. And then, you see, I believe it. Because in our big book, it tells us what we alcoholics are. We're driven by 100 forms of fear: self-seeking, self-pity, and self-delusion. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So here's this woman said something nice to me. My mind warped it. I attacked her, and I was simply delusional to it. It wasn't until I shared it with my sponsor that my sponsor said, why couldn't you just say thank you? You know, that is a complete sentence. You know, I couldn't. I didn't know how, because I was driven by all these things, because I was running the show. I was managing my life. So that's where 8 came in. And I finally realized that I needed to make that list of those I had harmed so I would feel better, so I would quit harming myself. So then when 9 came along, that's when I really got this real gift of love. I was really able to see that I could make an amends to you and tell you why, to be open, to not hide anything. My sponsor said, when you make an amends, you tell them that you're an alcoholic. And you did that because you are an alcoholic, and you're making amends because you are an alcoholic. And if you don't make amends, you may drink. Now, they can do whatever they want with the amends, because it's not up to me to worry about that. And I said, well, wait a minute, I don't like this. You know, they're going to think bad of me. What if they don't really know? You know, what are they going to think about me? And my sponsor said, it's none of your business what they think about you. It is your business what you think about them. And what you need to think about them is they're God's kids. And because they're God's kids, and because you're God's kids, they're your siblings. They don't deserve to be stepped on. They don't deserve to be abused. They deserve to be loved and respected. My sponsor said, you don't have to like anybody, but you must love everyone. That really gave me a lot of peace. It really gave me a lot of freedom, because you see, when I'd come to AA meetings, I would hear people talk about being able to have this wonderful, fancy, terrific life, and I kept thinking, I'll get there, but I wasn't. I wasn't getting there. I couldn't understand it. I'd do my sharing, and every time I did my sharing, I'd say, well, she doesn't like that. She thinks I do. Oh, man. So I tried to say what I thought you wanted me to say. And in that point, I never even knew what I was going to say. I never even knew who Kay was. You see, now I know that Kay's an alcoholic. But I also know that Kay is God's kid. And I also know, because Kay is an alcoholic, she's got the greatest gift there is. Because you see, as a nurse, I've worked as a nurse since 1967, and I've seen a great many people die. And I realized that one of the important steps of dying is surrender. You have to surrender your job. You have to surrender your place in the family. You have to surrender so many things when you're dying. And hopefully, if you die well, you've surrendered all your resentments and you're able to come to peace with those in your family. The gift with AA is I knew I was going to die. I knew I was days away from dying when I began to surrender. And each time I surrender, I let go of a big load. And each time I let go of the big load, the looser I am, the lighter I am, the higher I feel. I wouldn't go back to my old way of life for anything. Then we have to come into 10, and 10 is really, really a difficult one, because it talks about, my sponsor hit me with this all the time. I used to call him up and say, you know, they did this and they did that and I feel awful and blah, blah, blah. And he said, you know, it's a spiritual axiom that when you're upset, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with you. I didn't want to hear that. The cause was they hurt my feelings. And my sponsor said, you gave them the power to hurt your feelings. No one can hurt your feelings without your permission. What they think about you is none of your business. He told me that suffering was optional. He told me that if I am upset, no matter what the cause, that I have taken God off the chair, and I've put either myself on the chair or I've put that other person on the chair. And he said, the job is to take that person off the chair and put God right back on the chair. When I was, I guess about 6-8 months ago, I went to work one day and we were woefully understaffed, and I had to take charge, and we had some very sick patients. And I started getting report from the night nurse. And I'm in a unit that has all nurses, and so we're all in the same area getting report. And only I have to get report and responsibility for the whole floor, not only my own patients. And so I'm getting report from this night nurse, and she said, and I didn't get this accomplished. Fine. And I wasn't able, thanks. I didn't, this is another thing I have to do, I said. The whole nurses station got so quiet. And I said, if you don't mind, would you just excuse me for a minute? To the nurses station, they all kind of looked at me. I sat down and I said, I understand my evil twin was just here. I think I've gotten rid of her. But please let me know if she shows up again. So a 10th step doesn't always mean that we have to say, I am so sorry for doing that. What it means is I have to realize that if I'm upset, there's something wrong with me. And I don't need to have anything wrong with me now. You see, the first thing I learned in AA is that I have only now. This is a program of now. My sponsor taught me that my God can only contact me at the intersection of here and now. But then my sponsor said, Kay, you're always at the intersection of then and there. And it's absolutely true. I was always either in remorse for something I did last week, last month, last year, or I was in fear or over something that was going to happen. But if I stay in the now, right now, I'm complete. Right now, all is well. Right now, I don't need to die. Right now, I have my God. Once I accept that simple fact, I am fine. And to the best of my ability, when I work with people, I try not to tell them they're going to feel better. I try to tell them that they're better now. They just need to change their viewpoint. It's an attitude adjustment. So in 10, it says that I need to realize that I need to be able to stay sober, keep an emotional balance, and live life to good purpose under all conditions. Well, I can do that if I know who's in the chair in my life. After I've done that, you see, now I have nothing in the way of that decision I made in my third step, to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. You see, right then and there, I've got my 11th step there for me. I have my meditation and prayer. I can have that intuitive guidance. It says in the big book, we thought was a flimsy reed, turns out to be the strong and loving arm of God. I've got that for me. You see, I've got that because God has always been intuitively guiding me. My sponsor said, you need to think of God as a radio transmitter. And you're the radio. Just because you shut off the radio doesn't mean God's not still transmitting. Just because you've turned the dial to booze doesn't mean he's not still sending the message out. He's not saying, well, Kay's drinking, so I guess I won't give her any hope. No, he's still doing it. So I try to seek through prayer and meditation, and I had a difficulty with meditation, especially when I was in fear. Tremendous amount of difficulty because I couldn't stand still. You see, part of this, the way the disease was explained to me, is that I have this infantile ego. Well, the infantile ego wants to go, 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 go. I'm always busy. I have to be there. And I didn't know how to do it until one day I woke up I was working the night shift. So I woke up in the middle of the morning, which was kind of frightening because I had to go back to work that night. And I was in such tremendous amount of fear that I knew I wasn't going to be able to go back. And so I got in my car and I got to a park. And I parked my car, and I started walking around the park. And I started thinking about faith. And I started thinking about all the things I had absolute faith in. Since it was August in the San Fernando Valley, the first thing I had absolute faith in is I wasn't going to freeze to death on my walk around the park. Then I had faith that it wasn't going to snow. Then I had faith it wasn't going to rain. Then I had faith that I would be able to walk through the whole park. Then I had faith that my car would be there. By the time I finished my walk through the park, I had faith that I would be able to go back to sleep. And I had faith that I had a loving God who was going to guide me. I got into my car, I went home, and I was able to sleep better than I ever had, because that was my first form of meditation. We don't always have to be gone. We need to just start meditating. Just open up and just give it a try. Many years ago, I read Norman Vincent Peale, and he said, when we read a paper about a football game, we start thinking about that football game, and we start thinking about the last time we went to a football game, the football game we went to, who we were with, who was playing, and who won. Before you know it, we spent 20 minutes meditating on football. So I started meditating on some of the things they told me about in AA, and it's worked for me. And as far as prayers, I start my day on my knees and I end my day on my knees, but I also keep God in talking all the time. I talk to him all the time. Every time I start an IV on a patient, I put my hand over the area and I say, Lord, guide my needle. Help me to take care of your kid the way she needs to be taken care of. Help me to guide my hand so I can do what needs to be done. So I try to make everything I do in the day my prayer. That's my 11th step. And then we come to the 12th step, and that's really the coolest thing, because the 12th step is really a guarantee. It says that we will get it. It doesn't say you might get it. Some people have been known to get it. It's a flat-out guarantee. Now, that's absolutely phenomenal. If you think about it, you can't take a spiritual action without getting a spiritual result. The way it came clear to me is I've worked in emergency rooms, I've worked in ICUs and all this, and I've always thought it was funny over the years. Paramedics bring patients in and they're unconscious. And we keep the patient alive as long as possible. We put a tube down their throat to breathe, help them breathe. We give them IV fluids. We do all these things to keep them alive until we find out what's wrong with them. And sometimes they become conscious in a little bit. Sometimes it takes them a lot longer. But it didn't matter whether I worked in ICU and it was days they were unconscious, or if it was just a few minutes when they were unconscious. But when they wake up from being unconscious, they go, they're shocked to see me. And I say, I've always been here, you just didn't know it. And I always said that to them. And I did that one night at the ER. I said, I've always been here, you didn't know it. And I thought, my God, that's the 12th step. He was always there. I never knew it. Because I couldn't see it, because I was self-delusional. You see, this is a spiritual program. This is the only disease that we can get and be better than baseline. In any other disease, we have a baseline. Patient gets sick, we try to get them back to baseline. This disease, we have a baseline of neurosis. We get sick. And if we take the spiritual cure, we get higher than baseline. I've got a mind from God guiding me, not that old mind that got me to drinking in the first place, but the mind of the creator and author of the universe. I want to thank you for letting me share.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.